Greetings, wanderers. Macy Jones arrived on a wet Tuesday. It was the kind of rain that didn't fall so much as cling, misty and persistent, like breath on cold glass. The boarding house loomed at the end of a cul-de-sac, its bricks the colour of rusted steel, and its windows tall and narrow, like coffin lids stood on their end. This wasn't a normal house. Or was it? She didn't expect a welcome. The landlord had left the key in a rusted tin box nailed to the doorframe. Inside, the air smelled of old varnish and something faintly sweet. The stairs creaked with a sound that felt deliberate, as if the house were announcing her presence to something upstairs. Her room was on the third floor. The attic, I suppose. Sloped ceiling, warped floorboards, and a radiator that ticked like a metronome with a grudge. But it was hers. A single bed, a desk, a wardrobe that leaned slightly to the left, and a window. The window faced the alley. It was a narrow thing, barely wide enough to open, and the glass was old and bubbled, distorting the world outside into a smear of grey and brick. But she could see the alley, and that was precisely the problem. First night, she noticed the figure, just a shape at first, pressed into the shadows between the bins. She thought it was a trick of the light, a pile of rubbish, but it didn't move, not even when the wind picked up and sent the bins rattling like bones. The second night it was closer, still in the alley, but nearer, watching. Macy couldn't see a face, just an outline, a suggestion of shoulders, and a faint gleam of something pale where a face might be. By the third night, she left the lamp on. She sat at her desk pretending to study, her eyes flickering to the window every few minutes. The figure was gone. She almost laughed. Almost. Until she saw the smear. A handprint on the outside of the glass. Long fingers pressed flat against the pane, as if someone had leaned in just to see her better. She didn't scream, she didn't move, she just stared at it until the sun came up. When she finally walked over to the window, the handprint was gone. Macy didn't tell anyone. Not because she didn't want to, but because the words felt brittle in her mouth. Like something that would shatter if spoken aloud. And what could she say? That a man was stood in the alley each night watching her window, without moving or breathing. She imagined the looks that she'd get, the careful nods, the quiet patronising concern. First-year nerves, city stress, too many horror films. So she said nothing. She went to lectures. She sat in the back row and took notes she couldn't remember writing. She smiled when spoken to, laughed when prompted, nodded when expected. But her mind was always elsewhere, hovering 3 floors up, behind the taped curtains of her narrow window, listening for the sound of a breath that didn't belong to her. By the end of the week, she was sleeping in fragments. 20 minutes here, an hour there. Dreams came in flashes, wet footprints on the ceiling, a face pressed against the glass, a voice whispering her name from inside the walls. And it wasn't just the figure anymore, it was the house. At night, it changed. The radiator ticked, yes, but now it ticked with purpose. Not the random expansion of old metal, but something more deliberate. A slow, steady rhythm, like a metronome counting down to something. And beneath the floorboards, something definitely moved. She first heard it on a Thursday, just after midnight. A soft dragging sound beneath her bed. Not scurrying or scratching, something heavier, like skin against wood, like someone crawling on their elbows, pulling themselves inch by inch. She froze and the sound stopped. She lay there rigid, her breath caught in her throat like a moth in a jar. And then, just as she began to believe she imagined it all, it came again. She didn't dare look. Instead, she pressed her ear to the floorboards. The next morning, when the sun was high and the world felt safe again. The wood was warm, not from the radiator or from sunlight, but from something that had been there, something that had lingered. She began to notice other things. The mirror above the sink fogged over in the middle of the night, even when the room was cold. Her phone, left untouched on the nightstand, would be dead by morning, its screen smeared with faint oily fingerprints. And her keys, always her keys. She kept them on a hook by the door, and every night she'd place them there, and every morning they'd be somewhere else, on the desk, on the floor, and once tucked neatly beneath her pillow. She stopped taping the curtains. It didn't matter anyway. She could feel the figure, the weight of its gaze, the pressure of being seen, like standing in spotlight even in the dark. And then came the tapping. It started just after 3 a.m, a soft, patient sound. She lay still, eyes wide, staring at the ceiling, and the tapping continued, as if whoever or whatever was outside knew she was awake, knew she was listening. And then it stopped. From beneath the bed, and from beneath the bed, a breath. Not a voice, not a word, just the sound of exhalation, slow, satisfied, as if something had been holding its breath and could finally let go. She couldn't move, she just laid there, heart pounding, until the grey light of dawn crept through the edges. When she finally looked under the bed, there was nothing there. The dust beneath them had been disturbed, dragged in long deliberate lines, as if something had crawled away just moments before. Macy found the photograph on Sunday. The rain hadn't stopped in 3 days. It drummed against the roof like fingers on a coffin lid. The house felt swollen with damp, floorboards softening and the air thick with the scent of mildew. She hadn't meant to open the drawer. It was in the hallway just outside her room. A narrow table with warped leg and a single drawer that stuck when pulled. She'd passed it a dozen times without noticing, but that morning something tugged at her. The whisper of instinct. And inside, dust, a broken comb, and a yellowed envelope sealed with wax so brittle it crumbled at her touch. And the photograph. Black and white curled at the edges. A group portrait. 8 people standing in front of the house. The same house, but older. The ivy hadn't yet strangled the brick, and the windows were clean, and the front steps uncracked. She studied the faces. Most of them had been blurred by time, smudged features, eyes lost to overexposure, but one stood out. A man, tall and thin, wearing a long coat that hung from his frame like wet cloth. His face was pale, too pale, as if the light had clung to him longer than it should have, and he was staring directly at the camera, directly at her. She turned the photo over, and the date read October 3rd, 1952, and scrawled in spidery ink, "He watches from the alley." She looked again at the man, the shape of him, the tilt of his head, the way his hands hung at his sides. That was definitely him, the figure from the alley. She dropped the photo and it landed face up on the floor, the man's eyes still locked on hers. She turned away, heart pounding, but something made her look back. And the man had moved. Only slightly. His head tilted a fraction more, his mouth, closed before, was now parted, just enough to suggest a smile. She blinked, and blinked again, and the photo remained unchanged, but the air had shifted. The hallway felt narrower, the silence louder. She picked up the photo with trembling fingers and shoved it back into the envelope, back into the drawer, slamming it shut. And that night she dreamed of the photograph. In the dream she was inside it, standing amongst the strangers. The house behind her, the man beside her. He didn't speak, didn't move, but she could feel his breath on her neck, cold and damp. And when she woke, the photograph was on her pillow, though the envelope was still in the drawer. And the man was closer. The clocks in the house had begun to lie. Her phone would blink 3:17 a.m, even in full daylight. The kitchen clock spun backwards when she wasn't looking, and her wristwatch ticked steadily, but the hands never moved. She started calling it the hollow hour, that stretch of time between dusk and dawn when the house grew still and the world outside her window seemed to fold in on itself. She no longer opened the curtains, not because she was afraid of what she'd see, but because she already knew. The figure would be there. He was always there, whether she looked or not, whether she believed or not. His presence had become a constant. The house had grown quieter. Not peaceful, it was never that. Just expectant. As if it were waiting for her to do something, or stop doing something. The floorboards no longer creaked when she walked. The radiator no longer ticked, and even the wind outside had gone still. She began to forget things. Where she'd put her shoes, whether she'd eaten, even what day it was. Sometimes she'd find herself standing in the hallway, unsure of how she'd even gotten there. And once she woke up in the bath, fully clothed, water up to her chin with the tap still running. She didn't remember turning it on. She didn't remember even getting in. She began to dream with her eyes open. She'd see things. Reflections that didn't match her movements, shadows that lingered perhaps a little too long. Once she even caught her reflection smiling at her, though she hadn't smiled in weeks. The photograph was gone. She'd burned it. The image remained, burned into her mind like an afterthought. She could still see his face when she closed her eyes, still feel his gaze. She tried to leave, packed a bag, walked to the door, but the key was gone. Not misplaced, just gone. The hook by the door was empty. The drawer where she kept the spare was locked. The landlord didn't answer her calls. Her phone had no signal, no Wi-Fi, just a blank screen and a time. 3:17 a.m. She tried the windows, but they wouldn't open. She tried the fire escape, and it just wasn't there. Just brick. Endless, unbroken brick where the ladder should have been. She sat on the floor and wept. Not loudly, not desperately. Just a slow, steady leak of grief. The kind of sorrow that doesn't belong to one person, but to a place. A memory, a curse. The house listened. She could feel it. The walls pulsed with breath. The floorboards shifted beneath her like muscle. The wallpaper peeled in long, curling strips, revealing something beneath them. Scratches. Names, dozens of them. Hundreds, maybe. Carved deep into the plaster. Eleanor Marsh. Lydia Crane. Sophie Bell. And at the bottom, freshly carved, Macy Jones. She didn't scream, she didn't move, she just stared at her name and understood. She wasn't being haunted. She was being remembered. The house had gone quiet again. Not the hush of sleep, but the silence of something holding its breath. Macy sat on the edge of her bed, arms wrapped around herself, staring at the door. It was closed and locked. She'd checked it twice, jammed a chair beneath the handle, piled suitcases against it. And still she felt it. The shift. The moment the house changed its mind. She didn't hear footsteps. No creak of stairs, no rattle of the knob, just sudden pressure in the air, like the moment before a thunderclap. Her ears popped and her vision blurred, and then he was there, standing in the corner of the room. Not a ghost, not a shadow. A man. Real. Breathing. His coat was soaked through, dripping onto the floor in slow, steady beats. His skin was pale, but not spectral. His eyes were sunken, rimmed with red. His hands, long and thin, hung at his sides like dead weight. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Macy couldn't move. Her body had gone cold, her limbs heavy with the weight of disbelief. This wasn't a haunting. This wasn't a curse. This was worse. He'd been watching her. Not from beyond, not from some other realm. From the alley. From the shadows. From the cracks in the walls where no one looked. He'd been inside the house the whole time. The floorboards, the whispers, the warmth. He'd been there. Living. Waiting. She tried to stand, but her legs buckled from underneath her. He took a step forward, slow and measured, as if savouring the moment, as if he'd done this before. And maybe he had. The names carved into the wall, the girls who vanished, the stories of ghosts and disappearances, they weren't hauntings at all. They were cover stories. Easier to believe in spirits than in men like him. Men who slip through cracks, who live in cruel spaces, and wait. She scrambled backwards, hands scrabbling against the floor, reaching for anything to defend herself. Her fingers closed around the lamp and she swung. Glass shattered, the bulb burst in a flash of sparks. Darkness swallowed the room. Silence. And then breathing. Close. Too close. She ran. Blinded, barefoot, down the stairs through the dark, the house groaning around her like a thing betrayed. She didn't look back, she didn't need to. She could feel him right behind her. She reached the front door. Still locked. She tried to scream, just a sound raw and ragged that tore her throat and filled the house like smoke. And then light. A neighbour's porch light flicked on across the street. A curtain twitched. The house flinched, she felt it. The pressure broke, the door gave way, and she stumbled into the rain, into the street, into the world of the living. And behind her, the house stood still, dark, silent. The man never followed, he didn't need to. The new tenant's name was Isla. She was 19, studying literature. She liked old houses and quiet places, and the idea of living somewhere with character. The landlord had given her a discount, so the last girl just left in a hurry. Something about stress and exams. The house was quiet when she arrived. Kind of quiet that feels like it's listening. The third floor room was just as described. Sloped ceiling, warped floorboards, a bed, a desk, and a window that faced the alley. She liked it until she opened the wardrobe. Inside, tucked behind a moth-eaten coat, was a newspaper. Folded, yellowed. She pulled it out, curious. The headline stopped her breath. University student found murdered in attic room. The photo was grainy, but the face was clear. The article was short, but the words bled through the page like old wounds. Macy Jones was discovered in the early hours of October 17th. Cause of death, exsanguination. Authorities report signs of prolonged confinement, and the room was locked from the inside. Isla kept reading. The body was found beneath the floorboards, folded and arranged, eyes removed, mouth sewn shut. No signs of forced entry. She dropped the newspaper clipping and looked around the room, really looked. The wallpaper was new, fresh paint over old sins, but in the right light she could see it. The scratches beneath the plaster. Names. Dozens of them. Hundreds maybe. And one more. Fresh. Isla. She backed away, heart pounding, breath shallow. The air had changed. And then she heard it. A sound beneath the floorboards. Not rats, not pipes, but breathing. She turned to run, but the door was closed, locked, and the key gone. The window wouldn't budge. The radiator began to tick, slow, like a countdown. She screamed, but no one heard. The house swallowed the sound. And from the shadows beneath the bed, something moved.